Welcome back to MVM. Today I'm bringing you a preview of Adventure Tactics from Letiman Games. This is a cooperative adventure game for 3 to 5 players where you're going to be taking on the role of fantasy characters playing through a campaign. In fact, the core of the game is this campaign guide that's going to dictate how you play the game, what adventures you trigger, what enemies you face, and the overall storyline. There is a designated start chapter and end chapter, but the way you get there is going to be completely different based on the choices you make and the way that some of your combat encounters play out. Every player is going to choose a character to play, and you're going to see these colorful deck boxes out on the playing field. When you take a deck box, you're going to notice the art of your particular character on here, and this is going to store all of your cards in between games, because at its core, this is a deck building game. You're going to start with a basic amount of cards, including basic attacks, movement, and things like that. You're going to add specific cards based on your class. Each class is going to have a little setup card. It's going to tell you everything to include in your basic deck, including your class feature and your passive ability. You're going to have a player board as well. And if you look at your player board, it's going to have a space to put your class card that just shows a picture of your class and that class feature. You can only have one of these class features at a time. In addition, you're going to be able to slot some skills and equipment cards on this player board as well. And I'll talk about those in a minute, but you don't start the campaign with any. So everyone is going to build their deck. You're going to end up with 11 cards, 3 of each basic card, plus whatever cards your specific class tells you to play. You're going to shuffle them up, and every turn you're going to have 4 of these cards. So your goal is to build this deck over time by slotting in new abilities and leveling up your character. As you play through the game, you're going to gain experience points that you can use to level up and eventually even level into a prestige class, which is a more powerful version of your basic class. And there are a ton of possible classes that you can choose to play. I mean, the stack is pretty huge, and each one of these comes with their own setup cards and special abilities and things like that. Now, the actual setup for the game is going to be dictated by whatever chapter you're on in the campaign guide. I do have the starting prologue kind of set up here, so there are no spoilers. I'm not going to talk specifically into what's coming, and of course, I only have a prototype here, so everything you see in front of you is not final. I'm using standees here for the characters, and I know they're going to be miniatures in the final copy. You might even see miniatures for some of the monsters and bosses and things like that, so keep taking a look back at their Kickstarter page as they unlock some of those stretch goals, and you'll see what they have available. But you're going to have a particular setup here with a particular objective. Usually you're going to be fighting against a boss. When you fight a boss, you're going to have a boss deck, and every boss in the game has a unique deck, and each one of these cards is going to trigger a specific ability. It's either going to have the boss move or it's going to have its minions move. So you're going to have a variable setup based on the number of players. I set this up here for a 5-player game. The instructions might also tell you to set aside certain figures because they might be summoned in at a later date when a certain gameplay event triggers. In addition, you're going to lay out these initiative cards, and these are dealt out randomly. You're going to see 1 for every player and then 2 for each boss. Whenever the boss triggers on the initiative, you just flip over the top card of the deck and you tell it what to do. Now, each one of these monsters has their own stats. You're going to have basic attack, move, and health. And again, that's all listed in the campaign guide. So when something tells a creature to move, it's going to move whatever that printed value is in that campaign guide, and they're going to just move towards the nearest player, however that's possible. Now, when it comes to your turn, you're going to use the cards in your deck to take actions. You're going to have 4 cards in your hand that you're going to draw. And like I said, this is made up of those basic cards, plus some of those more advanced abilities. You're going to get to take 2 actions on your turn. Now, everything that you can do on this board is dictated by these cards. So these cards are going to let you move, they're going to let you attack, they're going to let you do very specific actions out in that battlefield. In addition, you can use your class feature, which is sitting out here on your player board, and you have passive abilities that you'll need to watch because those might trigger at specific times. But on each player's turn, you're going to get to take 2 actions. And one of the most basic actions is just to play a card. When you play a card, you do whatever it says. You're going to move, you're going to make attack, you're going to deal damage, things like that. Each one of these cards is going to show a die symbol. For example, this rock toss tells me that I'm going to roll a white die, and it tells me that my range is 3. So as long as I'm within a range of 3, I take the white die, roll it. In this case, I roll 3. I'm doing 3 damage to that opponent. Nothing is going to mess with that. There's not a card played by the enemy. You're just straight up doing damage to the enemy. Same thing is dealt back to you. They're going to roll those dice as well. You may have armor and other passive abilities later on that negate some of that damage, but at the start of the game, you're just rolling that die. You're going to see up here a variety of health tokens and other status effects. You're mostly going to be just dealing damage, which is going to have you putting out health tokens here on the enemies as you damage them, but you might also be doing status effects as well. Some of the more advanced cards are going to be doing more of those status effects. When an enemy reaches its health value, it's defeated and taken off the board. If you manage to defeat one of the main bosses, then you may trigger the end of that game. However, beating the enemies or beating the boss is not always the objective. Sometimes you're going to have to find things on the board or interact with different objects. You're going to see a variety of terrain here that could potentially be set up on the board as well. Again, all based on that example in the campaign guide. Terrain and obstacles are going to interact with your ability to do attacks. They're going to block line of sight. They're going to cause you to move a little differently and things like that. You have to be very strategic on your turn. So moving around those obstacles, using that line of sight and things like that is all very important when you're playing these action cards. Another thing you can do, if you don't have a movement card, you can just discard a card without taking its action to move your character up to half of its movement value. So movement value for the character, again, is printed right on there. The fighter has a 4. I could move my fighter 2 spaces by discarding a card. However, if you have a basic move card, it's always better to use that because it'll move you your full movement value. The last 2 actions you can do are to switch out your weapons, armor, and accessories up here. As you progress through the game, you're going to be given treasure. You're going to get this treasure for beating campaigns, and you're going to be able to shop at a market in between adventures and buy things. These cards can be slotted up here on your player board, and they're going to give you bonuses. They're going to give you things to do in response to damage. They're going to give you extra die to roll for your attacks. They're going to give you new abilities you can do on your turn. You're also going to eventually find new passive abilities as well as dice abilities. And these dice abilities are going to allow you to mitigate the dice, but you have to learn these dice abilities. When you do learn one, it's going to come out onto your player board and tell you what you can do. For example, re-roll a particular kind of dice. In addition to switching out your weapons and items, you can also switch out your class feature. You can only have one of these active at a time, but if you drew another one that you like better, you can discard this one and place a new class feature in its spot and then have that ability instead. So those are your 4 basic actions. Most of the time you're just going to be playing these cards. When you're done, you're going to draw back up so that you have a hand of 4 cards again. At the end of your turn, you can always discard one that you don't like so that you can actually draw an extra card back up to that 4. And play is going to continue across this initiative tracker here with each character taking a turn order, including the boss. And again, these enemies are going to just react based on whatever boss card's drawn. Then you're going to take all of these initiative cards, including the boss cards, and you're going to shuffle them back up randomly, deal them out. So initiative turn order is going to change every round of the game. You don't know how many turns you're going to get before the boss acts again. One of these missions is going to continue until you've either failed, which means the characters have died a certain number of times, or if you've reached the success goal, which again is printed in the box. Based on whether you succeeded or failed, it's going to take you to a different story and a different chapter. And there's even like a success with bonus. There are some bonus objectives that if you complete, you're going to get better rewards. And it might even take you to a different side quest in the main book. Now, as you play through these and level up, you're going to, like I said, get those new abilities and cards. You're also going to get the ability to change your class. You can actually multi-class and you can add in different cards and find different combos amongst these passive abilities and class features and things like that. So there's a little bit of freedom to kind of explore with your class and kind of build your deck the way you want it to build, with the ultimate goal of getting into those prestige classes and playing your way through this entire campaign, getting to the end and defeating that final boss. And again, it's a very narrative-driven experience. It is very non-linear, so the order that you play through these is going to be very different. You might even be skipping some of these missions or playing missions that other players haven't seen or doing them in a different order. So that is Adventure Tactics. It's on Kickstarter right now, so take a look at their Kickstarter page to see what all the final components are going to look like, including anything that's going to be released during through stretch goals and things like that. Then come back here and leave comments, ask any questions. I'll be sure to answer them. And as always, thank you for liking, subscribing, and watching us here at MVM, and I will see you next time.